Well, this morning we have a guest, and I want to read to you Proverbs chapter 20, verse 5. It says, "The purpose in a man's heart is like deep waters, but a man of understanding will draw it out." And here's how you draw it out. You ask a guy last Friday morning if he'd be available this Friday morning to speak. And Jeff said yes. And so in just a moment I'll introduce him, but let's begin our morning with a word of prayer, shall we? Father, thank you for this day. Thank you that you have loved us so well to give us rest and safety and food and freedom. We thank you, Father, for your manifold blessings on us every day and for your protections that many of which we don't even know. We don't see them because they're in the heavenlies. They're fighting the enemies against us. And so, Lord, we pray that you would create a capsule, a haven here of brotherhood this morning, an eagerness to hear what you have to say to us, and use our brother's words to challenge us to go deeper in our relationships, because that's what you've intended for our good and your glory. So thank you for this opportunity in Jesus' name. Amen. Well, Jeff Danielson is our guest this morning, and he's been game to come and share his life and what brotherhood has meant to him, and how he goes on about his life to do that. So welcome, Jeff. Come and share with us this morning. You have the floor. Thank you, brother. And no sound, but we'll hear you, right?
You'll hear me.
All right.
Yeah. All right. Well, I always like to be prepared for glitches in technology, because I am about as dumb as they come with technology. And so, of course, I've got people for that, right? So I've got my people working on my PowerPoint presentation and stuff like that, and I've got it here on a thumb drive, on a flash drive, both in the PowerPoint PC system and also in Keynote, just in case the computers here are Mac, right? And then I also have it on a Google Slide, so you can actually access it in the cloud just from an email. Okay, so I've got it in all these formats. I've also got it on my computer right here, all right? And then you come, and the amps are down, right? So when the amps are down, not only do you not have a microphone to speak into, this little mic here is just recording. It's not putting anything up here. But now you can't hear anything over here. And I've got 3 little videos that I'm going to play. But I can still play the videos, hopefully, on here. Okay? So when we get to the little videos, I'll start that. But I'm honored to be with you this morning, as I am every Friday when I come here for a Bible study. And I thank you guys for gathering every week and for welcoming me here. So I'm going to share a little bit about, "O brother, my mentor, where art thou?" And I'm guaranteed that there's going to be one person that's going to be listening today, because it's Ed, because he's the one that has to advance the slides, okay? Because we don't have a clicker, right? So I'll pretend I have a clicker, and I'll go like this, Ed. And Ed will at least be the one person that's be listening to me. So Roger asked me last Friday, as he mentioned, if I would speak. I said, "What do you want me to speak about?" He said, "Well, can you talk about these 3 things?" So I wrote them down, Roger. How I was brothered as a young man, how I was brothered in my faith, and then how do I brother up with other men? And I thought about that for a moment. And I said, "Roger, I don't think you want me to speak about that." He said, "Well, why is that?" I said, "Well, unless it's okay for me to talk about how I've failed in those things. How I was brothered as a young man, how I was brothered in my faith, and how do I brother up to other men? Are you okay with a failure story?"
Yes.
Okay. And Roger also said yes. Roger said yes. So, and he did tell me, he said, as you start thinking about your life, at 50, almost 53 now, you're probably going to come up with a few stories. And so I thought about it, and sure enough, I've come up with a few stories. So that's kind of what I'm going to give you this morning. It's just some stories from my life. But Roger said, you do have to tell people like who you are and what you do so that they kind of understand a little bit about where you come from and understand who's speaking. So I'll give you a little background. I'm a chiropractor. Okay, that's my jam. That's who I am. I'm a chiropractor. I've got a business called Northern Life Wellness in Burnsville. I also have 10 other clinics throughout the U.S. About 10 years ago, I decided to mentor. I decided to pay it forward. So I started a company called Big Fish Training because I was having young doctors come to me and want to be an intern in my office because I speak at the university up in Bloomington, and I'm a guest speaker and adjunct faculty there. And so young doctors would come up and want to be an intern, and then internships led to associateships. And so I've had multiple doctors. Over the years, I've had over 50 associate doctors in my clinic in Burnsville. But what happens is that those young doctors, after a while, they come to me, they shake my hand, and they say, "Thanks, Dr. Jeff. It's awesome. I'm going to go start my own practice now." After I got them all trained, then they turn around and leave me. So I decided I'll make a program that really focuses on being intentional about them leaving. So I started a program called Big Fish Training where I train those young chiropractors in how to be an entrepreneur, how to be a business person, as well as being a good doctor. They're taught all the science in order to pass the boards, to get your license, the little piece of paper that says you now have the right to practice chiropractic in the state of Minnesota. And that's what the school does, is they get you ready to be able to do that. They don't teach you how to run a business, just like an attorney. They don't teach you how to run a law firm. Just like a dentist, they don't teach you how to run a business. They teach you how to fix teeth. Same thing with chiropractic. They teach you how to fix spines. But they don't teach you how to run a business. And all of a sudden, we've got 22 employees at our clinic in Burnsville. They don't teach you about all the stuff you have to know to be able to do that. And so I started that program called Big Fish Training. I also coach. I coach about 25 chiropractors around the country, invest in chiropractic clinics, and then I also have a marketing program to help chiropractors as well. Then about 10 years ago, I got the opportunity to be an investor in a restaurant. And I've always heard this, okay, if you want to lose money, a surefire way to lose money is get in the restaurant business, right? And so that's the mindset that I had when I went into the restaurant business is, okay, here's some money. I don't know anything about running a restaurant. I'm not going to be there flipping burgers or anything like that. But okay, let's do this. I'm willing to lose this money. And that's the way, when you go to Vegas, right, that's the attitude you have to have. You go with money that you're willing to lose. Same thing in the restaurant business. Actually, I've got a good friend, a very good friend. I met with him 2 days ago. He just sold his company for a large sum of money called The Nerdery. Okay, some of you might have heard of that company. He just sold that, and so what is he doing with his money? He's starting a winery. Okay, if you want to lose money on a massive scale, grow a vineyard. Grow a vineyard. And so I patted him on the back. I'm like, good man, good job. And he's building a legacy for his family, and if anybody can have a successful vineyard, it's going to be him. So I'm excited for him with that. But anyway, I became a restaurateur, bought into a restaurant. That became 2 restaurants, became 3 restaurants, became 4, and now has become 5 restaurants, and we have a restaurant management company as well. So I just listed a few of the restaurants here. Barley and Vine in Lakeville. Some of you might know Barley and Vine. Yeah, there you go. Great. Thank you. Tamarack Tap Room out in Woodbury. Great place. 72 beers on tap. So it's a fun place. And if you go in the bathrooms, you can pee into a keg. And that's real. That's true. And you know what's kind of fun is that when guys go into the bathroom, they take a picture of the urinal. That's a big deal. And then they come back to their table and they go, "Look, honey, look what I just peed into." It's kind of fun. And then Woolies Kitchen and Bar is the restaurant inside the Embassy Suites right by the airport. Some of you might have heard of Woolies Kitchen and Bar. We just spent a whole bunch of money, and the hotel did as well. They spent over $220 million to renovate the entire hotel. And we spend a bunch of money on the restaurant as well. So it's a beautiful place. PS Steak is downtown, right across from the Walker Art Museum. And then we are reinvigorating Butcher and the Boar. Some of you might have heard of Butcher and the Boar downtown Minneapolis. We're opening next October in the North Loop. So it'll be a new location. And then Trellis Management is my restaurant management company. I also do a podcast. It's called Cairo Feast. So if any of you are interested in entrepreneurship and stuff like that, and just doing life better, and just want something interesting to listen to, that's my podcast. It's primarily for chiropractors. However, the topics apply to every business. So it doesn't matter what business you're in. So if you care to listen to that, you can find Cairo Feast pretty much anywhere. About 7 years ago, I also became involved in a company called Interim Home Care and Hospice. I've got a passion as well for helping people in that last chapter of life, and so I own that business. That's down in Rochester, Minnesota. As I mentioned earlier, I'm also faculty at Northwestern Health Sciences, Palmer University in Western States. There's a little picture up there of me doing a class for some students, and after doing the class on how to adjust people, I let them all put their hands on me, and so it looks like they're going to tear me apart here. So now I say all of this not to impress you, because that's not the point. The point is to impress upon you that God has given me a lot of opportunity. And when God gives you opportunity, I have always felt that you better step through the door. When that door is open, you better step through the door. And so I'm going to tell you some stories, and hopefully you'll enjoy these. Here's where I've got a little video. So I'll probably turn this around. So if everybody's quiet, you might be able to hear it. But the first question I have is, what does brothering look like to you? Do you have a brother that you would follow through the mists of Avalon? Okay, is that what brothering looks like to you? Or is it a little bit more of like mentorship, where you have an older fellow that's a little bit more seasoned with a younger fella? And this happened in the movies The Avengers. Have you seen The Avengers? You've got Iron Man, and you've got this young Spider-Man. And there's a little interaction between Iron Man and young Spider-Man. So maybe you see brothering as having that mentor. Yeah, they're going to call me. I'm going to get my moment. I'm going to be part of the mission. So Ed, we'll just advance the slide here. About 25 years ago, I was attending a church called Bridgewood Church. It's an offshoot of Wooddale. And one of the people that was there at the beginning, actually one of my good friends, Steve Abrahamson, was one of the people one of the first people I met at Bridgewood Church. And Steve and I also had another good friend named Galen. And now I don't even remember who all was there. In fact, Steve, I don't know if you were there, but there was a group of us, a small group of us, about 6, that we decided we're going to do a dude's weekend. We're going to brother each other. Now, I was about 30 years old, 32 years old, something like that. And so Galen, who is the gentleman on the right side there, Galen was one of the guys that organized this little fiasco. We rented a cabin somewhere. I don't even remember where it was, to be honest. I think it was in Wisconsin somewhere. And we got this cabin, and 6 of us slept like cordwood in this little cabin. And we didn't really know what was going to happen, but we just did. It was a group of men, young men. We had no idea what we were doing to mentor each other and talk to each other. He was a professional with U.S. Bank, kind of moving up the ranks at U.S. Bank. I was a young chiropractor just starting to practice. There was a handful of other guys there, and we read the Bible. We read Scripture. We shared stories. We talked about our successes. We talked about our failures. We talked about our challenges, the things that we were dealing with our marriages. And yeah, there were a few brews that we had, and then we grabbed a football and we played football, touch football, and we had a basketball, and we played a little basketball, and we sweat, we got dirty, and we cooked food. Not well, but we cooked it. And we enjoyed that, and that went on over a weekend from Friday through Sunday, and that was just being together and being brothers and being in spirit. And over time, Galen moved up the ranks at U.S. Bank, so much so that he had the ear of the CEO of U.S. Bank. That's not easy. And he was a great basketball player. He was a very good basketball player. He had a full-ride scholarship to a small college in Iowa. And so he was an accomplished basketball player. And his dream, because his favorite team was Duke, and so his dream was to go to a camp, a basketball camp for younger adults, men, that wanted to be at Coach K's camp. And so his wife actually bought him, for his birthday one year, a ticket to be a part of this Coach K camp. And so Coach K, along with some of the past players that he had, would put on this camp, and they would break into teams over a period of a week, and these teams would practice together and play together, and then they'd play against each other. And so there were people like Grant Hill there, Christian Leitner was there, Coach K, of course, was leading it. And so my friend Galen got to be in the mix with these people and get to know Coach K, one of the greatest coaches of all time in college basketball. And wouldn't you know, Galen, this guy, when he gets the ear of somebody, he brothers him. It's just who he is. He brothers him. And he brothered Mike Krzyzewski, Coach K. He brothered Christian Leitner. So much so, in fact, he went back to that camp. He spent money again. It was like $2,500 to go to this camp. He went back again a couple years later. So he did the camp twice. Not just because he loved basketball and he loved playing with these guys, because he saw an opportunity to brother up with these men again. And he did it twice. Galen was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer. And Galen passed away. But before he did, about a month before he passed away, he invited me and a few others to come down to Kansas City. He was living in Des Moines, but he invited us to come to Kansas City. Why? Because in Kansas City, there was a preseason basketball tournament that Duke was playing in. So it was Duke and 3 other teams playing in this little tournament in Kansas City, and he said, I think I can get up the energy to do this. Can you come down? And so about 4 of us, along with him and one other person, we all went together down to Kansas City, and we got to be a part of the pregame shoot-around, which happens about 5 hours before the game. And then, so we're part of the team out on the court. We got pictures with the whole team. Galen was like a brother to Mike Krzyzewski. They were hugging. They were loving on him, and he was loving on them, and he could barely move. And we had seats behind the bench. So I got to sit behind the bench and watch Coach K coach. And straight across the court was his mentor, the person that brothered him, Bobby Knight, was right across the court watching. That was a cool experience for me. And three seats down was my friend Galen, sitting next to Christian Leitner. I don't think they even watched the game. Galen was brothering Christian Leitner the whole game. The whole game. Now, I don't know where Christian Leitner is at with his faith today. But man, Galen gave it to him. Challenged him. He showed me what brothering meant. My friend Galen. And your friend Galen, Steve. God uses all of us to be a brother. And sometimes it's those people like Coach K that you think are untouchable, like, oh, they've got it all together. Somebody's talked to them about Christ. Why would you assume that? I want to say to you right now, assume the opposite. Because people are afraid to talk to people like that. People are afraid to talk to the CEO of U.S. Bank, but the CEO of U.S. Bank was at his funeral and heard the message that Galen delivered via video at his own funeral. So don't assume. Don't make the assumption. And right now, today, a story is happening right here in the Twin Cities, right here south of the river in Apple Valley. This young man, okay, if you flip the slide here, Dawson Garcia. Okay, he spent the last year playing for North Carolina Tar Heels. In a year when they went to the national championship, he wasn't there. Why? He was back here taking care of his family. They had some health issues. And my son, who is, I see the GCU shirt here, my son is a senior at GCU. And he's going to graduate in December. And one of his buddies, they went to Prior Lake High School. And they went to Prior Lake High School with Dawson Garcia. And one of his buddies just recently, this year, led Dawson Garcia to Christ. 21 years old. Here's a superstar athlete, top of his game, right? He's going to be probably a lottery pick in the NBA in the next few years. And this 21-year-old led Dawson Garcia to Christ. And my son is an intern. He's studying to be a pastor. And he's an intern at Bethel's Rock, which is a church over in Apple Valley. And so last week we supported him. We went over there to the service. Who was in the front row worshiping? Dawson Garcia. And you wonder why he's staying here to be with the Gophers? Do you think it's because he just wants to be a Gopher? No. He's connected to a church. He's connected to Christ, and he doesn't want to let go. Don't ever assume that anybody is beyond who you should be reaching out to, who you should be brothering. Because a 21-year-old kid who doesn't know anything, doesn't have half the experience of any of you guys in this room, he's the one that led Dawson Garcia to Christ. That's pretty cool, right? That's brothering. Next slide, Ed. One of the young men that I bought a clinic for down south, great young man. Wonderful guy. Somebody you just want to hang out with. Such a fun person. And a great chiropractor. But he had some challenges with spending, some challenges financially. So our partnership, although it was supposed to go about 5 years, our partnership after about 4 years, I said, "But you need to be on your own." And he's like, "Yeah, I need to be on my own." I'm like, "Yeah, you need to be on your own." Because I couldn't, as I mentor and partners with other chiropractors, I need them to be very fiscally responsible and do things kind of the way I have it designed. And he kind of wanted to do it his way. And that's okay. So I let him go. But it was a little bumpy. That separation when I sold my portion of the business to him was a little bit bumpy. And I didn't know if I would ever hear from this gentleman again. About 3 weeks ago, I received this text. Hadn't been texted in 6 years. And 3 weeks ago, he sent me a song called "Counting Every Blessing" by the Wren Collective. And then this text, which I'll read, it says, "This week, 6 years ago, we sat together and signed a deal to be partners, which allowed us to start our dream. He and his wife are both chiropractors. If you want a lot of debt, marry another chiropractor." They started their career $500,000 in debt. That's how you do that. I can't help but sit here and be overwhelmed with gratitude for you two, meaning my wife and I. The unforeseen temporary strain is still on my mind. I would really enjoy coming to a Big Fish event this year and reconnecting with you and everyone. At the end of the day, thank you, thank you, thank you. Your heart for helping has laid blessings on our lives that are immeasurable. You have also been a main player, the original spark in me reconnecting with God. My life since that seminar in Dallas where you challenged me to find a church has been unbelievably amazing. My relationship with Christ is so strong and continues to grow every day. You are very responsible for that. Thank you for always being a positive impact on my life. I've taken it for granted at times, and I just want you to know I appreciate you. Hope to see you soon, buddy. So, sometimes the fruit of you mentoring somebody and brothering somebody, you don't know where that fruit is going to be. I'm fortunate enough, 6 years later, to see some of that fruit. And there are fruits that you guys are going to see from reaching out and connecting to people and brothering people that you will not see until you're in heaven. You have to know that, and you got to be okay with that. And once in a while, you're going to have one like this, where you're going to find out, even if it's 6 years later, 10 years later, 26 years later, what your brothering meant to them. Now, I've got another little video here. It's like 10 seconds long. I think you'll get the picture just by seeing it. Go to the next slide there. Okay. Yes, I'm standing in front of you, a frat guy. We hated the word frat because that was like derogatory, right? It was a fraternity. Okay. And my fraternity was Sigma Chi at UCLA. That's where I went to school. I went 2 years at Bethel College, transferred to UCLA. And this was my fraternity at UCLA. Up on the left corner there's a little picture of a few of my pledge brothers. They were in my pledge class. They were 2 years younger than me. I was much more mature. Thank you. I was a junior transfer. Most of my pledge brothers were freshmen, and they were pretty wild guys. This was a wild bunch. Now, flash forward 30 years. 30 years later, unbelievably successful group of young men. The gentleman on the far left up there is a screenplay writer. He's authored books. He's done screenplays for Hollywood. There's Hollywood directors from my pledge class. The guy on the far right of that top left picture, who's got his mouth wide open there, his name is Nate. He's a fixer. He fixes problems when they happen to big figures in politics. He's been hired by some of the top, primarily Democratic Party candidates and people. In fact, Gavin Newsom is a client of his. He fixes issues that they have politically and in the arena of the social world. So he's an attorney. These guys are very successful people, but they're a wild bunch. And 2 years ago, the month that the pandemic happened, so March of 2020, we were passing emails around, and they were going to get together. We were all going to get together in Arizona down in Scottsdale. And I was talking to my wife about it. I'm like, I know it would be fun to see those guys, but man, I'm so busy, and I don't really want to be a part of that, because I knew it was probably going to be kind of wild. But God just put it on my heart that I needed to connect with those guys, and so kind of going kicking and screaming, I decided to go. And I didn't know how I was going to sit around a table of successful attorneys and screenplay writers and people from Hollywood and whatnot, how I was going to talk about Christ, because that was my purpose. Was I want to connect with them because I'm a different person than I was back in 1991 when that picture was taken. And I didn't know how I was going to connect with those guys, but I went. And when I got there, and there's 15 of us, and when I got there, one of the guys that I least expected, instantly he and I connected, and I knew that he was a brother in faith. He had become a Christian. And so he and I connected right away, and we're like, okay, dude, how are we going to reach these guys? And so all of a sudden, I had a teammate. It wasn't just me going to try to share Christ with these guys, with these wild guys. I had a teammate. And that weekend, he and I, we decided together that we were just going to be open to God moving and giving us opportunity to talk about our faith. Unbeknownst to me, my nephew, my sister's son, my sister lives in Wilmer, Minnesota. Her son went on a mission trip to Texas. He was 19. He was a freshman in college at SDSU. And he was down in Texas, and he got a sinus infection. Sounds like no big deal, right? Healthy, young, strapping young man, plays soccer for SDSU. High-level athlete. And I got a call from my sister. This is when I'm sitting around having beers with my buddies down in Scottsdale. And I get a call from my sister, and she's wailing on the phone. What do I do? What do I do? What do I do? My son, Blake. I'm like, Sandy, what's going on? Blake was down in Texas. He got this infection. It was so bad he was delirious. He was losing his balance. They took him to the emergency room, and what they found was that sinus infection went through the cribriform plate, which is right through your skull, and it went into his brain. The infection infected his brain, and this all happened within a few hours. So he was in the emergency room just hours before their flight was supposed to come back to Minnesota, and they did emergency brain surgery on him in this hospital in Texas. And so after I got off the phone, I asked this group, I told them this story, and I said, please pray for Blake. If you would, please pray for my nephew Blake. And you could have heard a pin drop with these guys. And throughout that weekend, one at a time, these guys came to me. How's Blake? I've been praying for him. I don't know if they knew what or how to pray. But these partiers, these Hollywood types, were praying for my nephew, Blake. They drilled a hole the size of a racquetball on the side of his head, and they drained green goo off of his brain. They had to do 2 surgeries over 3 days. He actually had to stay in Texas for 2.5 months. This is a 19-year-old. He couldn't fly back. So 2.5 months it took. My sister went down and her husband went down. They lived at a place close to the hospital for 2.5 months. And even months after I got back to Minnesota, my fraternity brothers were emailing me and texting me, how's Blake? How's Blake? I didn't know how I was going to brother up with these guys. I didn't know how I was going to bring up Christ. But God knew. He gave the story. Now, I wish it wasn't Blake having a hole drilled in his head. That wasn't fun. But I've now been able to share this story because Blake is a Christian young man. And I'm like, Blake, guess what, man? And I told him the story. This is what's happening. Through you, Christ is reaching people that are a bunch of partiers from 30 years ago that I was in a fraternity with. And it's now started a relationship where now we're getting together every other year, this group of guys. And we're staying connected, and I'm continuing to brother. So it's not just about the parties, and it's not just about that. It's about the connection. And we'll go to the next slide here. Tamarack Tap Room is one of our restaurants. And 2 nights ago, I didn't really know how God was going to use me in the restaurant business. For those of you that have ever been in the restaurant business, it's pretty crass, to be honest with you. It's when the doors lock at the end of the evening, there's a lot of staff that pull up to the bar, drink. There's a lot of sexual promiscuity in the restaurant industry. It's kind of a tough go. But the general manager of the Tamarack Tap Room is a man of faith. He is a hardcore Reformed Christian. That guy, he will share his faith at the table. He has literally hundreds of times. His name is Jesse. And he was a drug addict. He was an alcoholic. And he's changed, and Christ has changed him. And he shares that story at tables. And he shares that story with the employees. It's a tough environment. One of my partners, his name is Bob Kinsella, and he's in the lower left-hand picture there. And the right picture is the board. So that's the board, and all of those people on the board are owners of the Tamarack Tap Room. And we had a meeting 2 nights ago. Bob needs a valve replacement. He has a birth defect that they found recently, and he's having problems. And so he's got to get a valve replacement. And so 2 nights ago, this was on Wednesday, we're sitting around that table at the Tamarack Tap Room. And we get there, and we're all ready to get started. And Bob says, okay, let's start going over the financials. And I said, Bob, if you don't mind, before we go over financials, I would like to pray for you. Again, you could have heard a pin drop. Because these other owners, pretty crass guys. restaurant guys. And Bob said, oh, that would be great. So I prayed. And I led these guys in prayer. And 3 of those guys afterwards thanked me for doing that. Because so many people, and I'm not that bold, but God makes me bold. Because I will not be ashamed. I will not be ashamed. I will not stand there and not have done something with the opportunities that God has given me. And so sharing my faith and sharing that prayer meant a lot to those guys. And yesterday, Bob was on my adjustment table in Burnsville, and he got an adjustment from me. And after the adjustment, he gave me a big hug, and he said, thanks for praying for me yesterday. Because next Wednesday, they're going to open up his chest. They're going to hook him to a bunch of machines. They're going to cut around his heart, and they're literally going to take his heart out. They're going to put it on a tray. They're going to take that tray into another operating room where other doctors are waiting. And they're going to operate on his heart while he's in the other room without a heart. They're going to finish that. They're going to bring it back in. They're going to put it back in there, put it back together, take the machines off, and it's going to work. Right? Unbelievable. That's what's going to happen. And those opportunities are in front of us all the time, and I'll have you advance the slide. So now is your opportunity to think and to talk amongst yourselves. And the things I want you to think about are this. Reach into your past. Maybe it's fraternity brothers. Maybe it's an old neighbor that no longer lives near you, but you'd like to reconnect to him. Maybe it's somebody from high school, somebody from college. Reach into your past because it's not too late for you to have an impact and for you to brother somebody else. Then reach into your now. Who's God putting in front of you right now? Friends of mine like Tony Steele. Thanks for your connection, brother. And I just met with the gentleman that you talked to me about recently, Ryan. And we connected. Actually, this was on Wednesday as well. Thanks for that opportunity. You never know who's going to introduce you to somebody that can potentially give you impact. So who's God leading you in front of right now? And the last one is reach into your family legacy. It may not be your son or your daughter. It might be a nephew. Okay? But who in your family can you brother right now to change the course of the legacy of your family? Okay? I did put my phone number there. If anybody, take a picture of that if you want to keep my phone number or whatever. If you ever want to reach out, if you ever want to share a coffee or a beer at Barley and Vine, I'd be happy to do that. So thanks for the opportunity to speak with you guys. Talk amongst yourselves, and then Roger will close us down.
Yeah, thank you, Jeff.